Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing really great. I'm doing well, thank you very much, and so much love to each and every one of you. But before we get started, don't forget to go and get that quintessential drink, because we all need to revitalize ourselves with something refreshing. So go and get yourself something lovely and refreshing, or something warm and cozy, because I've got a fabulous story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, I had been sagaciously and very wisely warned about Mrs. Bonnet when I started working at the local florist's. I'd learnt that she was rather tough on her staff, would not stand for anyone ever arriving late. By all accounts, I was thoroughly enjoying my job. It was the quintessential opportunity to be away from home for a change and to express my creativity. When you have young children to organise in the early mornings to get off to school, it's never easy. There are invariably always delays, as my kids could not find a missing shoe at the very last minute, or something like that usually our mischievous dog Scruffball had somehow squirreled away under the sofa, along with a plethora of other items that he always hides away. I mean, what, I ask you, does a dog want with a hairbrush, a pair of nail clippers, a ball of wool, 3 odd socks, Lego blocks, a headless Barbie, and a teddy bear? But you name it, Scruffball was always hiding everything away. Ironically, it was always the very thing you were looking for at the last minute that seamlessly had vanished off the face of the planet. On this occasion, looking for my son's shoe had consumed all our precious time I could ill afford to lose. Then there were other times when I'd taken my kids to school and my daughter Cindy informed me that she had forgotten her lunchbox at home. So I had to drive all the way back to get it for her, as I couldn't have my kids starving at school, or what kind of a mother would that make me? Now, anyone who's ever had children will comprehend what I'm talking about. Every morning it's like an obstacle course to get your children ready for school. It's not just about dressing yourself and getting yourself together, but 2 rambunctious, adrenalised kids as well, that would be likely to leave their heads behind if given the chance. Of course, they never tell you when you decide to have kids of all the challenges along the way, how hard to find any time for yourself it's going to be. I had come to a place in my life that I was literally yearning and longing for adult company, as looking after both my kids and talking to them expeditiously all day about Eddie the Turtle and Ronnie the Octopus in one of their storybooks was becoming laboriously prosaic. I think if I heard my kid talk about Ronnie's wandering tentacles one more time, I would quite literally go bananas. Don't get me wrong, I'm very glad I had kids. I have no regrets on that score. But I never knew just how enervating and debilitating it would be to be watching over my children day in and day out 24/7. How listless, feeble and fatigued I would become. I remember once learning about some birds that lay their eggs in other birds' nests, so another mother of a different species is forced to look after the strange chicklet. When I was young, I thought that lazy mum should be very ashamed of herself. Now I think she's really rather astute. It makes perfect sense to divide the responsibilities when it comes to raising kids, as there's one thing every mother needs, and that's some free time to be her authentic self, along with a good, decent night's sleep. One day my best friend May and I were randomly discussing how to be more efficient mothers, where we could enjoy our kids, but at the very same time have some me time to ourselves. We both emphatically decided that Monday, Tuesdays and Wednesdays I could have that time to myself, while she would take care of my kids after picking them up from school, while on Thursday, Fridays and Saturdays she could do whatever she wanted, and I would take her kids under my charge. The arrangement had quite literally transformed our lives. We were like wary, droopy flowers that were suddenly watered and revitalised, becoming bright and colourful again, renewed in our health, energy and personal happiness. Life was 1,000 times better for the both of us, and we now had our personal space. I worked 3 times a week at the florist in town. For me, this was the release I needed from being shackled to my job as a mother. I felt as if my clipped wings had finally grown back, that I could fly all over again. My boss, Miss Bonnet, had given 2 warnings to me for being late. I somehow felt like a reprimanded, admonished school kid for being told off by the headmistress for being a very naughty girl. I wasn't surprised to learn that in her youth Miss Bonnet had been a teacher, which was why in running her florist she did so with an iron fist. She didn't pack any punches either. Lynn, the girl who worked full-time at the florist, assured me that if I was late more than 3 times, I would definitely be sacked. "I'm not joking," she warned me. "Miss Bonnet can be as tough as old boots. She doesn't take excuses kindly. I promise you she's been through staff as often as you have eaten chocolate." I ate chocolate an awful lot, so that must mean she had got through a plethora of staff. The first time I was late at the florist was when my daughter had thrown up all over her school uniform. I sent her to May's house to recover from her upset stomach, but Miss Bonnet was not sympathetic. "I can't abide people being late. I don't listen to petty excuses. You've made arrangements for someone else to take care of your kids, so why the delay?" "Well," I said, "I had to help my daughter wash up all the mess, change into new clothes. Then I dropped her off at May's house." "That's still no excuse," she said. "None at all. You have someone else looking after your daughter on Monday, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so why are you making up soppy stories? Have you never heard of delegation before? Isn't that why you've got someone helping you out?" Lynn had rolled her eyes in the back of her head as Miss Bonnet lambasted me with a real dressing down. I realised Lynn was absolutely right. I was definitely going to lose my job if I wasn't expediently prompt. If I was going to keep this job, I was going to have to be punctilious and pedantic about all my timekeeping. That was not going to be plain sailing by any manner of means, as sooner or later something would happen that would invariably delay me. I was so enjoying working at the florist. I'd met so many fabulous customers, and I was really relishing making up stunning, beautiful flower arrangements for all our clients, for all kinds of spectacular occasions. One morning my dog Scruffball appeared to be struggling to get sick. I discovered there was a lump in the back of her throat. I began to panic, as something was clearly stuck in her alimentary canal. I was worried that my dog's airway was being blocked. When I took her to the vet, he removed one of my son's soft little plastic lizards that had got caught up in her throat and pulled it out. It came out in one piece, a horizontal shoe-sized bright green lizard, and of course everyone cracked up laughing, while Scruffball looked terribly pleased with herself and very happy to be reunited with the green lizard. But I popped it right back into my purse. Of course, when Miss Bonnet found out why I was late, she wasn't impressed, nor even remotely amused. "You sound as if you live in a circus. You shouldn't be leaving your son's plastic lizard around for your dog to eat. I'm sorry, but this is your second warning." "One more warning, and you're out, Heather." "Miss Bonnet," I said to her, "I think you're being fallaciously unreasonable. I really do." "Well, that's your opinion, dear, and you're entitled to that. But it's not mine. I think it's sapiently judicious for my staff to arrive on time, to keep their houses in apple pie order so that plastic lizards don't get caught up in dogs' esophaguses. Why on earth do you have plastic lizards lying around your house in the first place? I don't understand. Haven't you heard of boxes for toys for your kids?" "Mrs. Bonnet, have you ever had children before?" "No, I have not, dear, and I'm very glad about that. I also have not been weighed down with a husband. I've been on my own all my life, and that works very well for me, thank you very much. You know, Miss Bonnet, if I lived alone, I'd be able to turn up for work like clockwork every day. Things happen when you raise kids. I promise you they do. Sometimes you can't help but run late, because you're not just taking care of yourself, but you're taking care of an entire family. And any woman who's been a mother, in my opinion, is a hero. It's one hell of a tough job. I always say being a mother is the hardest, most underrated and underappreciated job in the entire world. Well, you should have thought about that, dear, before you decided to raise a family, shouldn't you? You know the problem with young people today? They're all far too eager to jump into the sack, failing to consider the long-term inauspicious ramifications of their decisions. Consequently, they fall pregnant, failing abysmally to take charge when the kids arrive on the scene. If you choose to have kids, my dear, then you need to manage them properly. If you decide to keep pets, make sure you don't leave plastic reptiles lying around. It's unambiguously straightforward, not rocket science. "Yes, Miss Bonnet," I said, perceiving that getting through to her would indeed be harder than training Scruffball to stop stealing our stuff and hiding it from us. "Heather," said Miss Bonnet, "I will remind you, this is your second warning. The next time you're late, you will be out. I cannot show staunch favouritism to one member of staff over another. Rules are rules, and they're not made to be broken. Do you understand?" I knew there was no point in expostulating with the woman, so consequently I was literally hanging on a cliff edge by a thin spidery web. One wrong move, I would go plunging from the rocks to the rock pool below with a mighty crash, which meant one thing only. Invariably Miss Bonnet would sack me. I know it sounds incredulous, but I did get the distinct impression that Miss Bonnet thoroughly enjoyed being officiously bossy and subjugatingly assertive in her business. Being the quintessential top dog, by throwing her weight around, it made her feel validated. Possibly living on her own, she got rather lonely, so dictatorially laying down the law gave her a feeling of significance. "You better watch yourself," Lynn warned me. "If you're late again, you're out, Heather. I'm warning you. It's so great having you working here. You're the best florist we've ever had. The trouble with Miss Bonnet, she means well underneath it all. She's not really a bad person, but she believes if you're late that she's personally being duped or being cheated. She has no comprehension of the challenges we face every day to get to work on time. She's very old school in her thinking, fastidiously set in her ways, I'm afraid." Then it happened, and I knew that I knew I was running late for work. There was not a jot I could do about it. It was one of those days when I didn't really have a valid excuse for running late at all. I guess I got out of bed the wrong side, and after that everything spiralled out of control, in the way that invariably always does. Little did I know that the wisest thing I could possibly do was to stay in bed, as things on this day would take a menacing turn that would leave an indelible imprint on my life. I managed to get my kids to school on time, but I was only wearing a tracksuit, so I needed to get home to get dressed. Then I struggled to find anything to wear. By the time I got into my SUV to go to the florist's, let's just say I knew that today was the day that I would lose my job. I climbed into my truck. I was already 15 minutes late, and I hadn't even got there yet. I had a huge lump at the back of my throat. My stomach muscles were clenching tightly and churning. I could feel the nausea rising up in the back of my throat and taste the bitter bile on the back of my tongue. I knew that my excuse today would not cut it with Miss Bonnet. I could not pull the wool over that formidable woman's eyes. The other 2 times I was late I had rather good excuses, and that had not been satisfactory enough for Miss Bonnet. But this time I had no excuse for my apathy or dawdling or procrastination, so I tried to think quickly on my feet about what I should say to her to excuse my lateness, but nothing seemed appropriate. The age-old adage, "the dog ate my kids' homework," would never wash with the likes of Miss Bonnet. Even if I told her I had to rush my kid to accident and emergency, she would probably not bat an eyelid. So I truly didn't know what I would say. I parked in the parking bay at the back of the florist, dashing out of my SUV as fast as I possibly could, slamming the car door behind me. I dashed hurriedly to the glass door of the florist. Who should be standing there in the doorway but Miss Bonnet herself? Let's just say she looked like a vulture waiting to pounce on a bloody carcass with her sharp talons, and I was that carcass. She had her hands resting defiantly on her hips. If looks could kill, she was wearing that murderous, reproachful look in her button-brown eyes that seemed incensed. I remember thinking in that moment that this thin, scraggly woman looked exactly like a vulture. It certainly helped that she had a beak-shaped nose. I could discern that the cantankerous, disagreeable woman was quite literally seething. Her oval jaw was clenched so tightly, I was almost certain she was grinding her teeth. "Good morning, Heather dear," she said sarcastically. "Or should we say good afternoon? Now pray tell me." She paused for a moment. "Now let's see. Did your dog get a lizard stuck in his throat this morning? Or did your daughter throw up all over her dress? Now what is your excuse this time? Or has the cat got your tongue?" "None of that, Miss Bonnet," I said with a pleading, beseechful expression on my face. Miss Bonnet led me into her office. It was a smart room, where she often saw clients when they came to discuss flowers for weddings, funerals, or special occasions. The office was remarkably clean, meticulous. The oakwood desk gleamed. I was almost hesitant to sit down on the ostentatious chairs. They were so grand, upholstered in a very sumptuous, grandiose, velvety fabric. "Sit down," said Mrs. Bonnet, looking at me with a steely gaze, with eyes so penetrating that made me shiver uneasily. "I'm very disappointed in you, Heather. You're 25 minutes late today. Now what do you have to say for yourself, young lady?" I hung my head in shame, feeling like a schoolgirl, again explaining my atrocious behaviour to the teacher. "Miss Bonnet, I truly am sorry about being late. I really am. I'd love to say that the dog ate my kids' homework, but that didn't happen," I said, trying to add some humour to the heavy, oppressive atmosphere in the room that was so claustrophobic it was cloying. I felt like a conspicuous mouse, trapped and being rounded up by the nasty household cat that had no intentions of dealing with me kindly. I was not going to leave this place unscathed without being pummelled alive by some very sharp claws, and humiliated and shamed in the process. The look on Mrs. Bonnet's thunderous face became increasingly more overcast, rather like a sky that's about to rumble with thunder and flash with lightning strikes. I watched her thin mouth turn downwards into a deep scowl. "You think you're being funny, Heather? You think you can joke about things like this, do you? You're recklessly irresponsible. You think it's no big deal arriving to work late, is that it? Do you know I take a dim view of people arriving to work late? You know what this means, Heather?" It was my mouth this time that turned down into a scowl, while my blue eyes filled with tears. "Miss Bonnet," I pleaded, "I really love my job here at the florist. In truth, it's saved my life. It really has. It's given me an escapism from my children. I find it a fabulous creative outlet where I can express myself. I meet so many wonderful people here. I've made many of our customers terribly happy here with my arrangements. I've also developed great relationships with people." "Well, if you love your job, Heather, then you should have looked after it, shouldn't you? Like anything you care about. But if you failed on 3 occasions to arrive at work on time, I have no option but to tell you to leave today," she said, scribbling down my cheque and handing it to me. "That's what I owe you in your wages. I'm sorry, Heather, that it's come to this, but I have no choice in this matter." "But you can't do this," I protested. "It's not fair. It's wrong. It's unethical." "I think you will find I can do this," said Miss Bonnet. "It's in my terms and agreements that if you're late 3 times after 3 warnings, I can ask you to leave. I'm in my right to sack you, and I have." I pulled the chair away from the desk and tore up Miss Bonnet's cheque in disgust, throwing the pieces into her face defiantly, my eyes filling with tears, but my anger rising up inside me like the waves of a tempestuous sea. I could feel that my tongue was wagging like the feisty sails of a large boat, blowing rambunctiously in the wind. I blurted out what needed saying, perhaps what others before me may have failed to say, but this contemptuous, narrow-minded woman needed to hear some home truths, which might be a bitter pill for her to have to swallow, but they needed saying nevertheless. "You know what your problem is, Miss Bonnet? You're a sad little old lady who hasn't got anything better to do with her life than make people's lives miserable. I know why you do it. You love the feeling of superiority, don't you? It gives you that feeling that you can belittle people. It makes you feel important. Now, I'm an adult, Miss Bonnet. You treat me like a silly baby. If I say I'm going to be late, it is because I have a legitimate reason for being late. You have fired dozens of girls here for the very same reason you're firing me today. Doesn't it show you that in people's busy lives you can be late? There can be traffic jams, all kinds of credible reasons why people can't get to work on time. You don't know what the word reasonable means, do you, Miss Bonnet? You're a dragon, a bully. Frankly, not a very nice person. Have you not got bigger fish to fry than worry about your staff being late by a few minutes? It's pathetic. It really is pathetic. My being 15 minutes late does not impede my work in any way. Look at the fabulous flower arrangements I've done for you. Irrespective of what you may say about me, you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone with my skills. But there you go, Miss Bonnet. It's your loss. I'm leaving now, but I'll say this about you. You're not the sharpest brick in the box, for an astute businesswoman would know that laying me off would be a huge loss to the business. But not you. No, not you at all. For you, everything is about timekeeping, when what you should be ultimately worrying about is work quality and how proficient your staff are with your clients. Good day, Miss Bonnet. Have a good life, and I hope it's a happy one. At that, I marched out of the shop and dashed to the parking lot, climbing into my truck. I began to drive away. I was so belligerently angry, I could feel the blood boiling in my veins. I wanted to hit something very hard, really hard, to get out my fury, as I had never been worked up into such a frenzy before. Sometimes I found that driving out into the countryside tended to take the edge off my anger. It helped to soothe my troubled, inflamed soul. In the past, if I became exasperated by a bunch of screaming kids, a drive in the countryside helped, but nothing was working today. I was growing more and more incensed with the audacious impertinence of Miss Bonnet. Why was she such an unreasonable woman? Why could she not judge me on the quality of my work, the way I deal with my customers? My being late by a few minutes had never affected my business whatsoever. It wasn't like I was a flight attendant working for an international flight and had to clock in on the dotted line. This was incredibly different. I knew finding another part-time job 3 times a week, doing something I love like this, was never going to be easy. I drew to the side of the road and texted my husband Ted. Just been sacked. I was late for the 3rd time. Tried to reason with Miss Bonnet, but she wouldn't listen. A text returned to me. The woman is unreasonable. Very sorry, love. I'm sure you will find another job very soon. You're a very proficient hard worker. It's her loss and your gain. I tried to text him back, but the screen went blank. Damn, I thought. I'd forgotten to charge my phone. This day was getting progressively worse and worse, second by second, minute by minute. I didn't have a charger with me, so my phone would be out of action for a while. I groaned, finding a part-time job like this again. One that I loved was not going to be easy. This job had been perfect for me, and jobs like this, especially part-time ones, did not grow on trees or dangle on marble fireplaces like Christmas stockings. As I was reflecting over these thoughts, driving in the countryside, admiring the exquisite views from my window, a white SUV came right up behind me and started hooting at me, as if to say, "Hurry up there." For me, that was like the trigger to my hypothetical rifle. I was now blazing with fury. I had just lost my job, and some loser out there on the road had the brazen audacity to honk his horn at me. How dare he? I was going at the right speed limit. He was the one in the wrong, speeding and hooting at me, for ostensibly I was not even breaking the law. He had a bloody cheek, I thought. My feathers were now fully ruffled. If he wanted to fight, I thought furiously, then he's got one. I'll show him that I'm no pushover. I put my foot on the accelerator and passed his truck, giving him the finger and sticking out my tongue at him. It was probably a childish, juvenile and churlish thing to do, but I really didn't care. It had felt strangely good, oddly cathartic, as if I'd let go of some inner angst and turmoil. After all, was I not entitled to let go of some of that steam? Especially after what I'd been through this morning. I was to learn that sticking my tongue out at him, blowing my horn, giving him an FU sign with my finger, was a very bad idea. A very bad idea indeed. Normally I would never behave in such a bold, bellicose, antagonistic way, but I was in a bad, pugnacious mood. My inhibitions had melted away, rather like the butter on a bagel. I had behaved in an inappropriate way that was contrary to my character. I had inadvertently blown caution to the wind. I had absolutely no idea that winding up this threatening stranger was the worst thing I could possibly have done, for I was to find out that this contentious, confrontational character was not the kind of man you rubbed up the wrong way, for he definitely had a chip on his shoulder. As I whizzed past the cantankerous, captious driver in my SUV, I felt momentary victorious, letting out a rather happy whoop. Whoop! Raising my hands up in self-congratulations. I'll show you, I thought, feeling rather proud of myself for being so assertive. But my pride soon dissipated. And that brief moment of satisfaction waned like a groaning wind blowing on a different course, letting out a disagreeable whistle. I could tell by the atrocious way the man was driving behind me that he was as mad as hell and was out for revenge. He began to ram into the back of my SUV 3 repetitive times. Bang, bang, bang. They were forceful bumps. He was honking his horn at me very loudly. Regretfully, there were no other cars on the road, so I felt incredibly isolated, alone, daunted and overwhelmed by this ambiguous predator in tireless pursuit of me. I pushed my foot down on the accelerator to speed up. The man began to speed up. He rammed his truck into the rear side of my SUV over and over again. Looking through my visor window, I could tell that the rear end of my car had taken a huge lashing. The back had buckled up significantly. This man was completely insane. He began honking his horn at me, zigzagging down the road in treacherous, precarious, highly dangerous manoeuvres that showed me that this peevish, truculent person was prepared to use his truck on me as a deadly weapon. I was being pursued by him. He meant business. I knew he was out for the kill, like a lion hot on the trail of a deer. This man was resolutely determined. He would stop at nothing until he'd beaten the very life out of me and left me for dead. How I knew this, I don't know, but I certainly did. I felt it in the core of my gut. "Oh my God!" I cried out aloud in my car. "What the heck do I do? What do I do? My cell phone's not working right now." I started to speed up with his truck racing behind me. I knew that I was seriously in trouble, as this angry man was out to get me. He was sticking his finger up out of the window and making these horrendous signs at me. The monster began chasing me down the mountain roads of West Virginia. In truth, I didn't have a clue where I was. I had lost all sense of direction. And without a working GPS, let's just say I wasn't in a particularly good place. I knew I was definitely lost. Every turn I took was literally a perilous risk. All I needed to do was to get away from this brutish man. But how? That was the question. I began to drive down a sandy road, with him ambushing me from behind, while I kept watching his outrageous, reckless twists and turns in the visor mirror. If I had not known any better, I would say he was driving like an intoxicated drunk, trailing behind me. But what I failed to realize was that the road had reached a dead end, so inadvertently I was rather trapped. There was a small clearing that branched out into a sprawling wood grove that was made up of red maples, sugar maples, red budwoods and oaks. Beyond that there was nothing else, only an ocean of trees, and still more trees, moving their boughs in the soft breeze, under the vast canopy of a very blue sky, without a fluffy cloud in sight. When I'd realized I'd reached this dead end and could not actually turn around my car without the man whizzing up to my rear with his engine accelerating, I quickly put my SUV into park, climbing out of the car, and I began to hightail it into the woods, thanking God for one day in my life when I was actually wearing sneakers, because I had been in a hurry this morning. Most days of the week I tended to wear the most impractical shoes, which would have been a death wish this morning. My heart was pounding violently in my ears as I ran across the clearing that was peppered with tufts of long grass, rocks, occasional wild flowers, and rambunctious weeds that were growing like little cactuses through the earthen floor. I sensed the place was rather remote and off the beaten track, not really the kind of place you would encounter a living soul. I could hear the man's truck grinding to a sudden stop. His tires began to skid on the granular surface of the road, making a discomposing noise. He slammed the truck door behind him. Then I heard shots being fired after me. My heart began to race, thundering through my chest. All I could think is, oh my God, this maniac is going to kill me, and get away with it too. The fear surged through my veins. My legs increased in speed. I deliberately zigzagged towards the woods as the shots were being fired after me. Boom, boom, boom. Believe me, there were a few near misses. "I'll get you, you bloody bitch," came a man's thunderous voice. I was breathing heavily. My mind was in a whirl. My life flashed before my eyes. It would seem that losing my job with Miss Bonnet was pie in the sky now, compared to the pickle I found myself enduring. I knew that the only way I could survive being attacked or killed by this ghastly, morose man was to find a good hiding place, to keep my head together. I couldn't afford to panic under any circumstances. That would be my ruination. As I entered the woodgrove, the tall, burly, wide, substantial trees penciled up into the sky like spectacular, imposing, verdant giants, their boughs generously covered in a plethora of leaves. The forest sparkled with a dewy, viridescent green. The sunlight danced through the branches, dappling everything in a soft, ethereal light. Even as I ran, I could smell the rich earthen floor, the bouquet of wild flowers on the wind. I could feel the beauty of this place as curvaceous tree trunks, rocks, broken forest debris were swathed resplendently in rich, sumptuous carpets of luxurious green moss. Then there were ferns with lacy, bountiful leaves spread out like open umbrellas. The ground cover on the forest floor was bountifully prolific, but where to hide, that was the vexing conundrum. I decided to conceal myself behind a large tree trunk rather than leave myself vulnerable to being caught in a compromising position where I could be ambushed and unable to escape. I stood very still, hardly daring to breathe, as the man finally entered the woodgrove. I could hear him as he thundered forwards, stomping on his feet like a belligerent bull, relentlessly pursuing a matador's red flag. No prizes for guessing who was that red flag. I was beginning to breathe very heavily. My heart could not stop pounding. It was loud in my ears. I was terrified that this man would find me simply by hearing my fear, for it had a frequency, I was sure of that could definitely be discerned. I took a quick peek at him from the corner of my tree. My God, he was possibly the most intimidating man that I'd ever seen. He was built like a machine, as if he spent his lifetime working out in a gym, pounding weights. He was strong, cold-blooded, mean-looking. I suspected he was such an angry character that punching a boxing bag at the gym and lifting some insanely heavy weights was his way of letting off steam. But today I was about to be his punching bag. He was wearing a string vest, so his sizable muscles were fully on display. He was heavily inked. His bald head was covered with a red bandana, but his face was contorted in the ugliest, most rageful expression. I could swear that there was foam emanating from his mouth like a rabid dog. "I know you're here, young lady. You're not going to get away with what you've done. Nobody treats me with such contempt. No one who does that escapes my wrath. Do you hear that, young lady? No one escapes my wrath. I saw you giving me the finger, sticking out your tongue at me, back there on the road. You are not getting away with this today. You are going to beg me for your life. I'm not in an agreeable mood, so you'll have to do a whole lot of begging." He laughed out loud, as if he was applauding himself by his pernicious humour. He smirked, and then unloaded a couple more bullets, firing them up into the air. Oh my God, I thought. He had something that ominously looked like a machine gun in his hands, like the rifles that they use in war movies, although I know nothing about ammunition. I knew this man could potentially kill me. I would be one of those dead bodies uncovered in the woods, whose murderer was never found. A duplicitous case of road rage gone horribly wrong. A large man who fancied himself as the Terminator was now in pursuit of me, listening attentively to every sound. One moment he walked past me and was so close I could literally reach out and touch him, but thank God he never saw me. I could smell the stench of his sweat. It infused the air with a pungent, obnoxious odour. Until now the forest had been pleasantly peaceful, filled with a pretty chorus of birdsong. But then the birdsong simply dissipated, as if someone had switched off the music centre in your living room. It became ominously quiet. Indeed, things were so quiet that my pounding heart seemed louder than the silence. I was petrified that this man would hear my breathing, for my internal rhythms, such as my breathing and heartbeat, appeared louder than this silence. The man was walking around the place searching for me. For some reason he'd sensed I hadn't gone deeper into the woods. How he discerned this I couldn't fathom. Then he saw me. He let out a huge, manic, rapturous roar, like an untamed predatory wild animal. a sound which travelled far and wide through the woodgrove with a powerful echo that could not be dismissed. I began to scream, "Get away from me! Don't come near me! Get away! Get away!" "Oh, what will you do to me?" he said, looking at me through his narrowing, guileful eyes that looked terribly pleased with himself. "You'll stick out your tongue at me? Give me the finger, will you? I don't think so. Look at you. You're pathetic. Not so cocky now, are you, girl? Go away. Leave me alone. Go away. You're crazy. There's something seriously wrong with you. You're sick in the head." In that moment I thought this vindictive man was going to shoot me. But no, this man had other ideas. Shooting me was far too easy. He wanted to inflict pain on me first. He wanted me to suffer, to get exactly what I deserved. I could see his intentions in his eyes. A murderous, revengeful look that wants to inflict massive suffering. I tried to run. I really did. But I was no match for this man. I was slight, small, petite. He was big and strong. As I ran, I felt his huge hand grabbing me from behind. He toppled me over onto the ground, so I fell backwards onto the earthen floor. He crawled above me, his calloused, roughed hands clasped around my neck. His furious, enraged face flushed bright pink. He began to squeeze my neck tightly. "How does this feel, you bitch?" he said, staring into my eyes with a measure of satisfied pleasure. I was fighting back with all my might, twisting and contorting my body. But this man held me down with a mighty, powerful force, upon which I was rendered helpless. Then redemption came my way. I heard this booming sound. It sounded like something ponderous, big and mighty was thundering in the forest. Then there he was, proud, tall, lofty, majestic, inquisitive. This titanic-sized creature stood still, watching the man intently, who had his hands clasped around my neck. But the man, upon beholding the creature, suddenly released his tight hold from me, consumed by astonishment. I don't believe for a moment he could comprehend what he was seeing, but he certainly discerned that this creature staring at him through his deep-set dark eyes was a potential threat. I choked and spluttered as he released his grip from me, finally being able to draw in fresh air. It was such a relief to be able to breathe again. I hastily sat up also to see the creature. I knew at once it was a Bigfoot. It was clear to see by the discernment in his wise eyes that he had a pretty good idea what was going on. There is no doubt in my mind that he was quick-witted, sharp, intuitive, highly perceptive, and terribly kind. He had the loveliest eyes I've ever seen. I knew this creature would help me, save me even. I was absolutely certain of it. I cried out to the Bigfoot, who had a human-like face. "You see this man over here? He's trying to kill me. Please help me. Please help me." For a second, the Bigfoot's deep-set dark eyes were pinned on me. He seemed to listen to my words, as though meditating on what I was saying. As weird as it may sound, he comprehended my pleas. I know he did. The man got to his feet and began babbling. "This woman, she's trouble." He reached for his rifle, which was clear his intention was to use on the Bigfoot. But it was too late, for the Bigfoot had read his thoughts before he could even act them out with his rifle. The Bigfoot bounded forward with his feet now standing on the man's rifle, so he was unable to retrieve it. His dark eyes were staring down at the man, whose eyes had grown round with terror. The Bigfoot's lips rolled back to reveal large human-like teeth. He began to growl at the man. It was a deep, low, guttural growl. It was a terrifying sound, and with his gnashes showing, let's just say he looked ferocious. The petrified man tried to get up on his feet and ran backwards, but the Bigfoot pushed him backwards so that he fell over, and the Bigfoot held him down with one arm. He went stumbling onto the ground. The man whom previously had impressed me by his size was now dwarfed and intimidated by this gargantuan creature, who made him look inconspicuous, tiny, and honestly quite pathetic. I remember even thinking that next to the Bigfoot he looked so fragile, as if he would easily break, like a fine piece of bone china. The man was screaming, even calling out to me for help, but I was not going to stick my neck out for him, for this man was duplicitous and untrustworthy. "Shoot him!
Shoot him, you bitch! Shoot him! The rifle's over there on the ground! Get it! Shoot him! The bloody Bigfoot is going to kill me, can't you see? Like you were going to kill me a moment before. I'm sorry, but I have no sympathy for your plight. You deserve everything you get. I'm sorry. The next thing I knew was that the Bigfoot reached for the rifle. He began to beat the man's head with it. He screamed, "No! No! No!" his oscillating arms fiercely fighting back. But he was no match for the Bigfoot. The man became silent, his body limp and lifeless. His glazed eyes seemed to stare vacantly into space. Truly, I felt no empathy for this man. What the Bigfoot did next was exceedingly bizarre. He pulled out the man's tongue, out from his mouth. Then he sat down on the earthen ground and began to eat it, as if it was a delicacy. Then he even tore off a piece for me, as if to say, "Would you like some?" He did offer it to me. I was shocked and shook my head vigorously, unable to stop staring at the creature as he ate the human tongue. It seemed quite chewy. I knew I was in no danger. The creature had saved my life, and as he ate the tongue he chattered away garrulously to me in a language that I did not comprehend, as if I was his very good friend, all the while looking at me through animated brown eyes that made me naturally like him. I stared at him in complete, total and utter awe. "Why?" I asked him. "Why are you eating a man's tongue?" I heard the words in my mind. "He used his tongue for evil. I'm using it for good. It tastes very good. Tongues are delicious. I'm not going to let a good thing go to waste." Did I really hear him say that, I wondered. "I better go," I told him, getting up onto my feet. The Bigfoot smacked his lips together. He got up. I heard him say in my head, "I'll see you safely out of the woods." I looked up at him for a moment. He looked down at me. I realized he was easily over 8 foot tall, possibly between 600 and 700 pounds, covered in long flowing hair on his body, a tortoiseshell colour with mixed varied shades, rather like those unusual cats you get. I walked through the woods with the Bigfoot by my side, climbing into my truck, being able to manoeuvre around the dead man's vehicle. The Bigfoot all the while watched me as I drove. I quickly raised my hand towards him to wave at him. He did the same with me, nodding his head. I returned the compliment. Then I drove away. I never told anyone about the dead body in the woods, or what had happened to me. It was my secret after all, that I never intended to share with a single soul. I'm sure I'm not alone in harbouring a secret like this. I never found out who the man was that died, but trust me, the world is a better place without him. He was evil to his core, and if I'd saved his life, he would have turned around and killed me. I know that to be a fact. Needless to say, after my harrowing experience in the wood, I didn't care about losing my job at the florist. Somehow it seemed inconsequential in the great scheme of things. A week after I'd left the florist, I got a visit from Miss Bonnet. When I opened the door of my home to see her standing there, I had half a mind to slam it back in her face. But she pushed the door open with her hands, asking me if she might have a chat with me for a moment. "Fine," I said, shrugging my shoulders, leading the woman into the kitchen, while boiling her a hot cup of tea. I knew Miss Bonnet drank tea only. "I've come here to apologise," she said. "You were absolutely right. I was exceedingly unreasonable. I guess I've been unreasonable all my life. Maybe, like you say, I am a sad old woman. But I do hope I'm not a dragon or a bully. You see, growing up as a young girl, my father was punctilious. He believed being late was the height of rudeness, was grossly unacceptable. I think it was ingrained in my psyche that lateness of any kind was not acceptable. But times have changed significantly. Life's got a lot busier these days. People's lives are wrought with issues. But living on my own, I failed to realise this. You, my dear, made me take a long, hard look at myself. I hate to admit it to you. I didn't like what I was seeing. What I've clearly become." Miss Bonnet had tears in her eyes. I reached out to comfort her. "I'm sorry," I said. "I was gutted when you sacked me. I didn't mean to lash out at you in the way I did. I deserved it, my dear. I really did. Needless to say, all my customers are exceedingly outraged that I've sacked you. I can't say I blame them. They're saying that they will not be ordering any flowers from me unless I reinstate you immediately. You see, my dear, my customers adore you. You were right. You've got heaps of talent, so losing you is very bad for business. I can see that now." "What are you saying, Mrs. Bonnet?" "I'm saying If you'll accept your job back, I would be delighted if you would return. But what about if I'm late, Miss Bonnet? Because I will be late again, possibly many more times. I can't go through all that aggro again. I don't care if you're late, my dear. I care about the quality of your work. That's the only thing that's important. I'm glad to tell you that I've worked for Miss Bonnet for many years, and then she handed over her florist to me when she retired. Never once did she ever accuse me of being late again. So maybe a leopard can change their spots. As for the Bigfoot, I do think of him often. I've thought of him a lot over the years. I'm ever grateful that he saved my life and that he listened to my pleas. I'm certain that obnoxious man would almost certainly have killed me. So there you are. That's my story. What a fabulous story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.